Hi everyone, it's Elise from Kit and Clouder Colouring Classes, and today I'm sharing a free markers tutorial for you on how to create a simple stone wall background that can be applied behind absolutely any image at all. You can do this technique with any colour blend, and why not check out my free colour blend charts over on the website at www.kitandclouder.com via the colour blend charts tab for lots more inspiration. This tutorial is actually chapter 1 from my brand new Holiday Homes coloring class release. This is a great beginner's class, and there's one class for markers and one for pencils, of which you can choose to do either or both. I'll take you through a big range of art fundamentals that will apply to all of your coloring after the lesson, and you even get a full printable step-by-step picture booklet to accompany the class video as well. You can find more information on this class just on the homepage of my website as well, and I hope I'll see you after this free tutorial to colour the rest of the image with me. If at any time you feel stuck with your colouring, overwhelmed, or like you aren't achieving the results you'd expect, I always do free one-on-one private tutoring with all of my students, even those in our free lessons. So please reach out by email or private message to me anytime at all, and let's chat together to help you feel more confident with your colouring. Okay, let's get started on the lesson. So I'm going to get us started today with the background. Now, I always like to do backgrounds first because I personally feel like it's easier to get those things that we're a little bit nervous of out of the way. And backgrounds are the things that people tend to have the less practice with. So because these techniques are new, they're generally the parts that we're a little apprehensive about. And getting them done before we color the rest of the image can help us feel a little bit more in control of the process, which takes out some of those nerves, and it can make us feel more comfortable, like we're not going to ruin any part of the image as well. I just want to remind you, I know I spoke at the start of the tutorial, but I want to remind you that when we do our coloring, it's all about just embracing any nerves we may have. And remember, we're not here to be perfect today. There is no pass or fail on your coloring. The whole point today is just to learn some new things, to go outside of what's currently comfortable, as that's what's going to help us grow. It doesn't matter what your outcome looks like on the piece of paper. So try and lose that misconception in your minds now. We don't need this to be perfect for you to have done a good job, for you to have grown, or to warrant spending your time on this. Just simply by doing, you're going to be improving. So we want to make sure that we're not just watching instead of doing. Sometimes watching it through first is a way to over prepare, and it puts our nerves into a little bit of overdrive, and it increases our anxiety because we can feel, how are we going to achieve that? So if that is one of the reasons why you're watching instead of doing, I really, really encourage you to put aside that misconception that you need to prepare in order to start, because you don't. You just need to grab those supplies, put in even just 10 minutes today and get started. And that's going to give you a lot more growth, a lot more understanding than just simply watching will. Because when we watch, we don't really know how hard something's going to be. We're just watching someone else do something that we haven't yet tried. So if it looks tricky or if it looks overwhelming, that's only the look of it. It's not actually the doing process. And I'm bringing this up because it has come up recently in our Facebook group that some people have been doing this and talking themselves out of starting. So I did want to put this at the start of this particular lesson, because this lesson today is really very achievable, even if you are a brand new beginner to coloring, even with this background that we're going to try today. So I want to make sure that you're actually giving yourself permission to start and not just over analyzing this process. So when we do the background here, we are going to be learning how to draw in this stone wall. You can see it's not part of my image, but I've got all the stones on my finished one. It's extremely easy to do, and the reason why I haven't drawn this background in for you is because I want you to learn how to do this so you can apply it behind your other images. It's a great backdrop behind your more realistic or your cuter images. It will work great behind any characters, so even your people stamps, other animals, even if you just have a floral image on the page. This is a background that's really very versatile and very quick to do as well, and you can start using this straight away on other images after class. To make this a little less scary, we're going to use a pencil and an eraser. So you can have an eraser nearby, just a normal pencil. And that way, if you're drawing something and you don't love it, you can erase it and try again. That's the great thing about lead pencil. Now, the whole point of doing this is you don't need any drawing skills. It's very, very simple. And all we're going to be doing is drawing just a mismatch of shapes here to create this stone background. So I want you to start near the top, and we're just going to draw a large shape that curves back toward the frame. As you can see, we're working with long strokes. We don't need them to be straight. A little bit of a wobble will make them look more natural as well. So I even like to hold my pencil quite softly. If you hold it softly, you'll get a natural bump as your hand sort of shakes, which adds to that texture. For the next one, what I'm going to do is I just leave a little gap. So we're leaving a gap for the grout lines, which is like that cement stuff in between your tiles, your stone tiles here. So I leave a gap, and you can do it however big or small as you like. It will just change the appearance of the wall. Doesn't mean it's right or wrong though. I'm going to bring this across, and then I'm going to angle down and down again, and bring it back up. And you can see I'm starting to create these organic shapes. Now you can see between these two shapes, I've got a little bit of leftover space. Now we need to leave this grout line on all the sides, but we can come in and fill this space up with another shape. And we can make these all different sizes, and we just start interlocking them in while leaving these gaps between. And when you have any leftover space, you can do a smaller shape to fill it. So you can see it's very, very simple. You don't need any drawing skills to do this, but every single person's is going to look a little different as they create these shapes. That's the great thing about this technique, is it's very easy to make your own. Now in this side, we're seeing less of the wall because the squirrel is covering some of it. So try and make your angles visible. So what I mean by that is if I come down here, I want to actually see like the edges of the rock where it sort of angles back. Now this technique as well you can do with all different color blends. I'm going to do a different bunch of grays today as well, so I can create something that has a bit more visual interest. So when we work with multiple colors in a background, it can help draw our eye in toward those areas as well. Now I've drawn these lines a bit too far apart, so I'm going to grab my eraser and I'm just going to bring that up a little bit more toward the rock above, so I've got less of that grout. Now my image is not extremely detailed today, and I'm not going to be using a lot of bright colors. So I want to add a little bit of interest in my background by using all different grays in this blend. If I had a more colorful image, like a character and she had a brightly colored outfit on or something like that, I might want my background to be a little bit more subdued so she remains the focus. So depending on the image you color will maybe depend on how you approach the color of the background. So you could easily do this background today just with one color blend as well. So you could use like just a light gray, or you could even use like a light brown. Or if you do want to add in a little bit more detail, you can do like what I have today, where I'm using multiple color blends. And that will add more detail to your background for you. So that's the rock wall all drawn in. You can see they're all different shapes, all different sizes, but they all loosely interlock together with the spacing in between for your grout. So now let's go ahead and add color to this. I'm going to grab E40, and that's going to be my grout color. And I'm just going to pop straight in between each of these rocks and lay down the E40 nice and quickly. Doesn't need to be perfect. You can see I'm doing it quite quickly and messily just to get my color down on the paper. This color is nice and light, so it'll work well between our rocks. I'm not even really bothering to erase the outline of the rocks as well, because the colors I'm going to use are going to be quite dark. If you wanted to use a light color for the rocks, you might lightly erase the pencil line so you can only just see it. That's the grout all done. So now your rock should be a little clearer to see on the page. So I'm going to alternate between three different blends, three different grays. I've got warm grays, which are a more red base, and I'll hold these up so you can see the difference. So that's a warm gray color. Then I've got a cool gray color, which is more blue based, and hopefully you can see the difference between those. So when we mix the colors, this gray just has more blue injected into it versus your warm gray, which has more red. So it changes the tone of that color. I'm also going to be using my neutral grays, which is more balanced between your red and your blues. So Copic in particular make quite a few different types of grays as well, and each one just has a slightly different tone. If you don't have any of the ends, I find most people have like the warms and the cools. If you've only got them, that's fine. Just use those two and alternate between those two blends. So I'm going to start us off with the warm grays firstly, and I'm going to bring my W5 in at this top rock. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a bit of texture throughout the face of the rock by coming in and doing a line which angles down a little. Now this line that angles down, I'm going to flesh it out by doing a little bit of shading there to make it thicker. I'm showing this line as like a little indent on the face of the rock. Anywhere that you add a darker color, it's going to look like it's further down from the light, like we talked about at the start of the lesson. So I've added that in to create, so instead of having a straight face, we've got the space that kind of like angles in and down. So it creates a little bit of interest and makes it look a little bit more like rock. I'm going to do a cast shadow down the side of the frame. So remember, when you have something in front or above, it casts a shadow back. So I want that frame to look like it's popping forward of this stone face. So we'll have a nice thick cast shadow there. I'm also just going to add a little bit of shading around the edge of that rock as well, just to show that it's sort of dipping back down. So now we have all these different levels happening over the face of the rock. I then grab W3 and I'm doing multiple strokes over the W5. Multiple strokes will allow the line of the color underneath to soften. So if you're using good bleed-proof card, which you should always be using with your alcohol markers, it makes it easier to blend and it prolongs the ink in your marker. It will really hold the layers of ink, so you can really come in and just do lots and lots of layers until you see the line soften. And then I grab my W1 and I just finish that up by doing, again, multiple strokes over where the last color has ended until I see the line between them soften back. I like to come in and do 2 coats of color. I find that when we do one round of the blend, the darker colors can feel a little bit desaturated, and that's because you've used the lighter colors to pull away some of that dark ink as you blend. So to do another coat, I grab my W5, my darkest color in this blend, and I literally just go straight over where I laid it the first time. And then I grab W3 and I pop in straight over the top. And W1. And that's just holding the color a little bit better the second time around. Okay, the next blend I'm going to use is going to be my cool grays. So I'm going to start with C5 and I'm just going to do the same thing, like I'm doing a little diagonal line down. There's no right or wrong way to do that. I recommend holding the marker loosely and just sort of pulling your hand down the page to make the line. And then you can thicken it up as well. So always thicker strokes are easier to blend out. So don't be afraid to pop in there and actually add thickness. I find that when we're a little nervous, we tend to hold back and we don't use as much of the colors. I really want each of your colors to be thick and extend further than the last. So when I come in with C3 here, you can see I'm going over the C5, but notice I'm actually really pulling it into the main surface area of the rock as well. I'm not holding back and only just applying a small amount. This is going to help me to get that nice blend. The next color is C1 and I'm just blending that out again a little further. Now I want the C's to be maybe a little softer, so I might leave that without doing my second layer. It's of course up to you, but I'm now going to come in and do my N's. So I've got N5 here. Now I've got a bullet tip marker for my ends. Bullet tip, brush tip, the techniques are exactly the same. So all I'm doing is I'm just popping in with this N5, I'm doing my cast shadow along the frame, and I'm laying down my color nice and thick. Then I'm going to grab my N3 and I'm just popping straight over the top and extending further, and then I've got my N0, which I'm using here to blend over the last area. Now I am going to repeat those colors so I can make it a little richer with the ends. So straight over the top of N5, N3, pulling further out, and then your N0. Now, can you see the difference between each of those color blends? So you should see they're a slightly different tone on the page. So that's the difference between your grays, if you've ever been wondering, is each one is a slightly different overall tone. So you can easily color a whole piece with just like 3 different gray blends and create a lot of texture and dimension, because you can see there how different each one really is, or we can control the tone of the overall image by playing with them. So now I'm just going to alternate between each of those blends again. So now I've got my cool gray and my N's here, so C and N. My W is all the way up here, so for this one I might make that my W. So that way I don't have 2 of the same blends like touching each other. So that was W5, and now I bring my W3 and then W1. Now that's quite a small shape, so I don't really feel like I need to repeat that. You can if you like. On this one over here, I'm probably going to do my ends because I've got a bit of a gap between those ones. So I'm going to grab the N5. And if you want to do like a bit of that diagonal line, so you've got to change in the levels, you absolutely can. Then I've got my N3. And you can see it's a little messy. Like I'm not really taking my time to be perfect here. I want a little bit of roughness. N0. The imperfect blending and the roughness adds to that stony texture. And 5, again, let's repeat those colors up. And 3. And then my N0. It's starting to come together now, starting to see that rock pattern happening. I might do my warm grays here on this next one. So there's no right or wrong with how you do this, of course. If you have two colors close together that you didn't really want, that's okay. It's just meant to look random and natural. W3. And W1. And then let's repeat. So I'm going to grab W5. Really make sure you're thickening up each of these colors. W3. And then W1. Let's get those cool grays happening on the next blend. So C5, we're going to pop in here now, do a bit of a shadow under that tail. C3 is next. And then C1. Let's get those ends happening on our next one down the chain. So I'm going to start with N5. Let's do that diagonal line down, thicken it up, and add in your shading. Now, we've got a lot of branches starting to overlap here. Remember when we talked about cast shadow at the start of the lesson? You can add in some cast shadows. However, the reason why I'm doing that is really just to make sure that my image looks like it's popping forward of that background and doesn't get lost. In reality, the squirrel is probably quite far above that wall, so we wouldn't see a strong cast shadow behind them. However, when we're coloring, a little bit of creative license here and adding in those cast shadows, it's just going to make for a richer image. And 3 is next. So it's not really necessary to add them in behind your squirrel, just because, remember, the further away it gets, the softer the shadows are until you can't see them. But it's just going to make him stand out that little bit more. And then N0. And I do like to repeat with my N colors. So let's grab that N5. Coming in and around the branches. N3. And then N0. Okay, let's do a little bit of warm gray in here. That was W5, this is W3. and then W1. And let's repeat that again. So W5. W3. And W1. Come down here and maybe let's do our cool gray in this edge so that we don't have two of the ends close together. So C5 here. C3. And C1. And that is your stone wall background all finished up. So hopefully that was a lot easier than you were expecting as well. Even though you had to draw in those elements, it's a really quick and easy way to create a simple background that can add a lot to your different images. Remember, at this point, it's normal to feel like things maybe feel a little bit funny though, because it's the only thing that we've yet colored on the page. So when we compare that with our finished image, you can see all of those elements come together really nicely. So we really have to keep going to see how the image comes together, to see how all the techniques work. I'd love to see you try this technique with other images as well, so have an experiment and a play after the class. And that is our background all colored up. So we've gone through a lot of theory just in this one quick lesson here today. These techniques can apply to absolutely any image you color up as well, but remember, it takes time and practice for these techniques to really sink in and become part of your skill set. Don't forget to join me over at kitandclouder.com to color up the rest of this image with me as well. And I'd love if you would even share your coloring from today's tutorial over in our free Facebook community. We have over 30,000 people who just love coloring and sharing their own work, whether it's from class or not, to celebrate their growth. We're not a group about competition, being perfect or better than anyone else, but just supporting each other in this hobby and our self-care journeys. I really hope you've enjoyed this free lesson, and if you have any questions at all, please do reach out anytime. Thank you so much for coloring, and I hope to see you over in our classrooms.